This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it's Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. This video is coming out on Christmas Eve, so I thought it would be a good time to revisit the MTG Top 10 on Gruul, since red and green are of course Christmas colors. The first MTG Top 10 on this topic came out in December of 2018. Unsurprisingly, the list has changed a lot in the last 3 years. To be eligible for this list, a card had to cost Gruul mana. This card can either be red and green or red-green hybrid mana. 238 cards were eligible for this list, and in this video we'll talk about the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic, as well as the cards from the previous list that are no longer on it. Here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours, Set Championships, and Mythic Championships. And a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes Magic Online Showcase Challenges and Grand Prix. Before we jump into this list, I do want to take some time to talk about a new sponsor that I'm really excited about. An upcoming card game called World Breakers, Advent of the Khanate, which I'm bringing you a sneak peek of. If there's two things I love, it's card games and medieval history, and this game masterfully blends both. It's set in an alternate version of 13th century Mongolia, where a substance called mythium has been discovered. This substance helps enhance people's attributes and makes them even greater than they already were. This game is not a collectible card game. Instead, you simply buy the game and you have access to all the cards. It's a 2-player game that you can play in both constructed and draft formats, and you know I love draft. When you play the game, you select from one of the 4 world breakers. Among them are famous historical figures like Cthulhu, the Mongol warrior princess, and Marco Polo, the Venetian trader and traveler. Within the game, you attempt to accumulate more power than your opponent, and you do this by attacking them with your followers and getting resources out of your location cards. I'm really excited for this new game, and I hope you are too. A Kickstarter campaign for the game will be launching in early March, and in the meantime, you can sign up for the mailing list. If you do that and later support the Kickstarter, you'll actually get an alternate art version of Marco Polo featuring me. You can find a direct link in the description that will take you to a landing page where you can sign up to be on the mailing list. Alright, let's get to today's list. We'll be starting with a quick look at the 4 cards that made the Gruul list in 2018, but are no longer on it today. First, there's Giant Solifuge, which was at number 10 last time. It hasn't gained any points since last time around, and 22 points was nowhere near enough to crack the list now, with the number 10 this time having 39 points. The Solifuge was played in aggressive decks in Ravnica Block Constructed and the Standard of 2006, mostly because it guaranteed you'd be doing some serious damage to your opponent, especially if you played it when your opponent's shield was down and you got to hit them for 4, and then you could attack with it again on the next turn, where they'll either have to take a bunch of damage or trade with it. Either way, you're going to feel pretty good. Next, there's Gore Clan Rampager, which was at number 8 last time. It's gained 4 points since the 2018 list, but that wasn't enough to stay on it. The Rampager is a nice card because it's either a decent, efficient creature or a potent combat trick. Those dual uses have been useful in mini decks, especially decks that look to do a ton of damage with one attacking creature, like Modern Death's Shadow or Infect. It's also benefited from the creation of Pioneer, where it's played in Gruul aggro. It is probably going to gain more points, but I'm not sure it will ever do enough to crack the list again. Dragon Lord Atarka also fell off the list after coming in at number 7 last time. She's a big, powerful dragon with a nice enter the battlefield ability that will allow you to have a big impact on the board pretty much always. She gained her points in Gruul ramp decks when she was in Standard, and since then has also gained a few points in Modern and Legacy decks that cheat creatures into play, but she's far from a staple in that kind of deck. The last card to fall off the list was Domri Rod. He's a nice planeswalker for creature-heavy decks, as all of his abilities involve them. He has a +1 that can draw you a card if the top card of your deck's a creature, and a -2 that has one of your creatures fight another. He's gaining points slowly, but it's not that likely he'll make the list again, even if he is only a few points out of the number 10 slot right now. Alright, now that we've talked about the cards that no longer make the list, let's see what is on the list this time around. At number 10, it's Violent Outburst, which has been pretty active since the 2018 list. It has a pretty underwhelming effect, as giving +1/+0 to your whole board for 3 mana is not a good deal, but it comes with the Cascade mechanic, and it's typically used in decks that can abuse it. In particular, it's been combined with various cards with Suspend that don't actually have a mana value. All you have to do when you have one of those cards is build your deck without anything that has a mana value of 2 or less, and you'll hit your powerful Suspend card every time you cast Violent Outburst. In Extended, this included Hypergenesis and Living Index, and in Modern, it's included Living End and more recently Crashing Footfalls. It has also found success in Legacy Footfalls decks and was also briefly part of the extremely busted Legacy and Modern Valky Cascade deck, which sought to fire off the Outburst and hit Valky with it. When you did, you could choose to cast a Planeswalker side of the card. They actually had to change the rules about how Cascade worked to make this deck go away. If you want to know more about Cascade decks, I actually did a whole deck history video on them a few weeks ago, but yeah, because Outburst can do some pretty absurdly powerful things with those cards, it is going to continue to gain points on the list. It seems like it has a good chance to gain another 25 points over the next few years. At number 9, it's Wrenn 6, a card that didn't even exist back in 2018, as it was released in 2019's Modern Horizons. This was a set that skipped legality in formats like Standard and Pioneer, which you might think would put Wrenn 6 at a big disadvantage, but it's a super powerful 2-mana Planeswalker that has seen play in all the formats that it is legal in, so it still manages to make the list. It gives you a boatload of value for a very low cost. Wrenn 6 can ping opposing creatures, which is a powerful effect in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, where there's lots of X1s. And on top of that, it can also return lands from your graveyard to your hand, like fetch lands or other utility lands, and it also has a pretty sweet emblem that gives your whole graveyard retrace. Wrenn 6's ping effect has had a very real effect on the formats it's been legal in because it's made creatures who are X1s way worse, and as a result, fewer and fewer of those are being played. In Modern, Wrenn 6 has largely been featured in Jund decks, but it also has a few points in Death Shadow, Scapeshift, and Ramp. Wrenn 6 has also been played in the Eternal formats, where it can help you recur lands that destroy other lands, really depriving the opponent's mana. In Legacy, the +1 and -2 together could easily turn Wrenn 6 into a land destruction engine that also punished any deck playing X1s, and that was too powerful for the format, resulting in it eventually getting banned there. Still, Wrenn 6 maintains legality in both Vintage and Modern, and it will continue to gain points in both of them. In Vintage, it's played in the graveyard-oriented Canadian Threshold deck and the Planeswalker-oriented Planeswalker Control deck. Wrenn 6 is very likely to continue to move up this list. At number 8, it's another Gruul Planeswalker, Xenagos the Reveler. He was at number 5 on the 2018 list and has now fallen to number 8. He's only gained 3 points since then, so he hasn't been terribly active. Like Domri Rod, this is a Gruul Planeswalker who loves creatures. His +1 gives you mana equal to the number of creatures you control, his 0 ability makes a 2/2 Satyr creature token that does a good job of protecting Xenagos, and his ultimate lets you put creatures and lands directly onto the battlefield from the top of your library. All of these abilities are pretty nice in creature-heavy decks. Unsurprisingly, it was mostly played in aggro decks in Standard like Naya, Jund, and Gruul. After rotating out of Standard, Xenagos went dormant for a pretty long time, but it has recently started to see some play in Pioneer Bard class decks, where its status as a legendary Planeswalker makes it extra good. While 3 points in 3 years isn't impressive, the fact that those 3 points have come in the last few months might be a good sign for Xenagos going forward. At number 7, it's Destructive Revelry, which has fallen 3 spots since 2018. Fittingly for Gruul, this artifact or enchantment destruction effect comes with the added bonus of also damaging your opponent, and that's pretty nice, especially for aggro decks that aren't super interested in having cards that don't do damage. But hey, those decks need to blow up artifacts and enchantments sometimes too, and this fits perfectly there. In Standard, it was primarily played in Gruul aggro decks, and in Modern, it's mostly been played in Burn. It also has 2 points in Legacy, and both came in the aggressive Canadian Threshold deck. More recently, it's gained points in Pioneer Gruul aggro. It will continue to gain points going forward. At number 6, it is Clothus, God of Destiny. It's another card that didn't even exist in 2018. It made its debut in 2020's Theros Beyond Death. Like all Theros gods, if you get your devotion high enough, she becomes an impressive, indestructible creature, but she gets most of her value out of her powerful ability that triggers during your pre-combat main phase. She can be used to hate on the graveyard, while also giving you some serious value in the form of either mana or life drain, and you can of course also use your own graveyard as a resource, giving you a ton of control over what she does. Clothus has quickly managed to gain points in pretty much every single format as a sideboard and occasional main deck card, allowing it to get so high on this list in spite of the fact that it is newer than every other card on it. It has a great chance at continuing to move up this list. At number 5, it's Burning Tree Emissary. It's the only card that was on the list last time that has actually improved its spot. It came in at number 9 last time, so it's improved its ranking a whole lot. The Emissary is great because it's effectively free, and sure, you need some mana upfront to cast it in the first place, but it gives you that mana right back, allowing you to very easily double spell on turn 2, usually by playing another creature, and that's a pretty spicy turn 2 to play 2 2-drops. Back in 2018, it had only gained points in block and standard aggro decks, but a lot has changed since then. The Pioneer and Historic formats made their debut, and the Emissary is legal in both. It's also started to gain points in Pauper. It's also got a single point in Modern. Now, it's featured in aggro decks in all of those formats, and it looks like that's going to continue. At number 4, it's Firespot, which has fallen one spot since the 2018 list, only gaining 6 points since then. Firespot is a board sweeper that's part of a pretty cool cycle of hybrid mana cards that have different effects depending on the colors of mana you use to cast it. It only hits flyers with just green mana, and only creatures on the ground with just red, and obviously both those with flying and those without when you pay red and green mana. This makes Firespot a pretty nice sweeper since you can opt to choose the option that most benefits you when you cast it. That flexibility, plus the efficiency of 3 damage for 3 mana, has led to Firespot seeing play in pretty much all of Magic's competitive formats. In most of these formats, it sees play in combo decks that like having a 3 mana sweeper that can buy them the necessary time against aggro decks to go off with their combo. The exception to this is in block and standard, where it was mostly played in ramp and control decks, where it pretty much did the same thing. It slowed down aggro decks to make the game go longer. In Extended, it was played in Scapeshift decks and Tezzerator. In Modern, it's been played in combo decks like Splinter Twin, Scapeshift, and Primeval Titan. And in Legacy and Vintage, it's been played in Oath of Druids decks. At number 3, it is Manamorphose. It existed back in 2018, and actually it had for a while at that point, but it didn't quite have enough points to make the list with only 20. It's done a lot of work since then though, sporting an overall score of 56 now. Manamorphose might not look like much at first, as it's basically just a cantrip that filters mana, but it's the exact kind of card that Storm decks want, since it lets you add to your Storm count while getting deeper in your library without really spending mana. It has gained a few points in Standard and Legacy, but the bulk of its points have come in Pauper and Modern. In Pauper, most of those points have come in Storm decks, but in Modern, there's been a little bit more variety. Decks that run very few lands are also interested in Manamorphose. This includes things like Belcher, and blue-red prowess aggro decks like it too, since the deck is filled with all kinds of cards that trigger when you cast spells. While it will continue to see play in Modern, the Storm deck it was part of in Pauper has been banned out of the format, so it's likely to gain more points, but maybe not at the same rate it did over the last 3 years. At number 2, it is Huntmaster of the Fells. This powerful werewolf hasn't done a whole lot since 2018. It only gained a single point, but it had so many points that it was able to rest on its laurels and still hold on to the number 2 spot pretty comfortably. The Huntmaster is a pretty awesome value engine. When it comes into play, you end up with 2 life and 4/4 worth of stats across 2 bodies. Then, if it transforms, you get to do 2 to an opponent and one of their creatures, and when it transforms back, you get the wolf token and life again. So yeah, it can really take over games and give way more than 4 mana's worth of value. It has seen significant play in both block and standard, where it appeared in decks like Naya and Jund midrange, and it's also been played in modern Jund decks. It did pick up its single point earlier this year in a modern Jund deck, and the card is powerful enough we should probably never count it out, but if the cards behind it keep putting up points, it may slip on this list in the future. And at number 1, it's Bloodbraid Elf. Like Huntmaster of the Fells, it's in the same slot today that it was in 3 years ago. It's kind of funny, we started the list with a Gruul card with Cascade, and that's also how we're ending it. Unlike Violent Outburst, Bloodbraid Elf has some serious applications outside of combo decks. It isn't generally used to cast cards with no mana value. Instead, it just gives you 2 very real cards worth of value, between its 3/2 body with haste and whatever it cascades into. Even if it just lets you play a 1 mana spell for free, you're doing a pretty good job, and that's basically the worst case scenario. In Standard, Extended, and Modern, its most frequent home has been Jund midrange. In Standard, you could cascade into nasty stuff like Sprouting Thrinax or Terminate, and in Modern, the ideal thing to hit on your cascade is Liliana of the Veil. Someone playing a Bloodbraid Elf and a Liliana on turn 3 or 4 was such a backbreaking combination that the Elf found itself banned in Modern in 2013. However, the Elf was unbanned in February of 2018, and since then, it's been played not only in Jund decks, but also Red-Green midrange and Utopia Gruul. It hasn't taken over the format entirely since being unbanned, but it is gaining points in Modern at a pretty decent rate these days, and it will probably stay at number 1 on this list for a long while. Well, those are the 10 Gruul cards that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past MTG top 10s, including many more on various color pairs and identities, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to support me and the channel, you can do it on Patreon. Thanks for watching and happy holidays.